I was back at our poll table talking to a student, and I noticed a group of three guys behind me. They were kind of listening in and kind of looking at our poll table, seeming like they were interested. So I turned and engaged them, and I just asked what they thought about abortion. And they shared with me that they were from Zimbabwe and that abortion really isn't talked about there. And their names were Chimdi, Denzel, and Brian. And I asked the three of them kind of each what they thought, what their opinion was about abortion. Chimdi shared with me that he was pro-life and did not think abortion should be legal. Denzel and Brian, though, they said that they thought it should be legal. And it sounds like they were personally pro-life, but they just thought that abortion should be a choice, that women should have. So we went through a bunch of different points. I went through biology and equal rights, different things, and they were quite receptive, which was really cool. They seemed like they were willing to listen. And so we kind of were talking for a while, and I felt like I got to a point where I wasn't really getting through. They were listening to me, but they still were really firm that a woman should have a right to choose. At least Denzel and Brian were. So I didn't really know what to say at that point, and thankfully Tammy, at this point, one of our other staff members, she came up and was just kind of listening into the conversation, and she later shared with me that she was not there to necessarily say anything, but she was there just to be a support in case I needed her. Thank the Lord she was there, because I was able to turn to her and say, "Hey Tammy, what do you think? Do you have anything to share in this conversation?" And she did. She shared her brilliant 2 buckets analogy, which is basically she asked all of us, imagine we have 2 buckets here. Bucket A is filled with, and they're both filled with choices, both of these buckets are, and bucket A is filled with choices that are like personal preferences, where you go to school, what you like to eat, who you choose to spend time with, and bucket B is full of choices that actually harm others, choices like rape and murder and assault. And these are choices that we would all say there should be legal restriction on. And then she asked the 3 guys what bucket abortion belonged in. Does it belong in just the personal preferences bucket that doesn't harm anybody and we should all be able to do whenever we want? Or does it belong in the bucket that harms others? And they all said, to kind of my surprise, that yeah, abortion belongs in that harmful bucket. And I was like overjoyed at this point. I was like, wow, something, so seemingly simple, they just understood that. And that was really, really cool. Brian, though, was still kind of resistant. He said, I think the reason that people don't care about abortion like they would care about, let's say, a toddler being killed, we had already talked about, toddlers and trot out the toddler. He said the reason I think people don't care about abortion in the same way is because they can't see it. And he almost said it as a way of justifying his own position, kind of suggesting that he didn't really care about abortion as much because he couldn't see it. And then I knew exactly what I needed to say. And I asked him, I said, have you heard of Emmett Till? And actually all of them said yes, they had heard of Emmett Till, which I was a little surprised by. So I just kind of recapped the story of Emmett Till, which is basically, Emmett Till was a 14-year-old black boy who lived in Chicago, and he went down to Money, Mississippi in the 1950s to visit his cousins, and long story short, he ended up being brutally murdered by these white men because Emmett had allegedly whistled at a white woman, had spoken to her, which is you're not supposed to do that in the segregated South at that time, and he was brutally murdered by these men. And his mother, Mamie Till, ended up having a open casket funeral for her son, even though people were reporters were like, hey, why would you do that? Your son's body is in a horrible condition. Why would you show the public that? And she said, and I quote, because I want the whole world to see what they did to my boy. And I shared that story just kind of recap that story with Denzel, Brian, and Chimdi. And I share with them that Mamie Till, Emmett's mother, by physically opening that casket of her maimed and disfigured son, she actually metaphorically opened the casket on racism. And she showed the world what it was, and they saw it. Now, was Emmett the last boy who'd be murdered or the first? No. But by her showing that, and by those pictures that Jet magazine published in the newspaper, what those did was show the world what racism was and the horror of it. And it was in clear view. And at that point I said, I actually have some images of abortion with me, of the results of abortion with me. Are you willing to look at those and see them? And Brian didn't really want to. He said he had seen some. He didn't really want to look, but Chimney and Denzel were willing to look at those images, and I showed them. And even though Brian didn't see, the point was sinking in, and he was making that connection that this is the reality of what abortion is. And just like how Mamie Till opened the casket and showed the world, this is what we're doing on abortion. We're opening the casket, so to speak, on abortion. And after I showed those pictures, even though, Brian didn't look, he and Denzel and all of them, the next thing I knew, they were all saying that abortion should be illegal at any point. And I was just so overjoyed, just really so surprised, that they just had that quick of a shift on it. And it really was such an encouragement to me. And it was kind of like, I felt like the Lord was telling me, this is why you're here. This is why we're doing this. It's for people like Denzel and Brian, who, they have open hearts and minds, and they're willing to listen, and you're making an impact. And it was just such a gift to me being, just a newbie doing this on campus. This is my first experience, and it was like a gift from God to me, telling me that, yeah, you can do this, and people actually will change. Now, do we always see people change like that? No, we don't. In fact, most of the time we don't. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't, do this. A lot of times we're just planting seeds and we don't see the results of those seeds. But there are times, like at Wichita State University on that first day, where God does give us a gift like that and does show that, yeah, you're doing something and it's in plain sight. And that's what it was for me that day. And so that gave me motivation for the rest of the day to continue talking with people and sharing the pro-life message. And even